The world outside was a blur of angry green and brown, a canvas smeared with the chaos of war. The Black Hawk vibrated violently, a mechanical beast straining against the leash of gravity. Each shudder resonated in my bones, a primal drumbeat echoing the fear thrumming in my chest. My hands, slick with sweat, gripped the worn leather of the seat. Below, the landscape was a jigsaw puzzle of destruction, a grim testament to the relentless appetite of conflict. Smoke plumes, like dark, grasping fingers, reached for the sky, staining the azure with the grime of human folly. We were skimming the earth, a metal dragonfly flitting through a battlefield, each moment a gamble against unseen threats. The rhythmic thwack-thwack-thwack of the rotors was a constant, hypnotic pulse, a soundtrack to the impending unknown. It was a sound that had become inextricably linked with dread and anticipation, a prelude to the symphony of war. The air inside the cockpit was thick with the metallic tang of fuel and the nervous energy of the crew. Faces, grim and focused, were illuminated by the flickering glow of the instrument panel. Eyes darted, scanning the horizon, searching for any sign of danger lurking below. The pilot, a man named Reyes, was a study in controlled intensity. His jaw was tight, his gaze unwavering. He was a conductor of this mechanical orchestra, a master of controlled chaos. He was the only thing standing between us and the abyss. A sudden jolt threw me against my harness. My heart leaped into my throat. Reyes swore softly under his breath, correcting our course. The ground rushed up to meet us, then fell away again. We were dancing on the edge of disaster, suspended between heaven and hell. I closed my eyes for a moment, a silent prayer escaping my lips. A memory surfaced, unbidden, a flicker of warmth in the cold landscape of fear. It was a memory of home, of laughter, of a life that seemed impossibly distant now. A life I desperately hoped to return to. The memory was of my grandfather, a man whose hands were as weathered and strong as the oak tree in his backyard. He was a man of few words, but his presence was a comforting weight, a silent promise of protection. He had been a pilot himself, a veteran of a different war, a different time. He used to tell me stories of flying, of soaring above the clouds, of seeing the world from a perspective only birds could truly understand. He spoke of the freedom, the exhilaration, the sense of being unbound by earthly concerns. But he also spoke of the fear, the loneliness, the constant awareness of mortality. He had given me a small, silver compass before I left. "Keep this with you," he'd said, his voice raspy with age. "It won't always tell you where you are, but it will always remind you of where you want to be." I clutched the compass in my pocket now, its smooth surface a small comfort against the rough fabric of my uniform. It was a tangible link to the past, a reminder of the love and support that stretched across the miles, a beacon guiding me through the darkness. I remembered sitting on his lap as a child, listening to his stories, mesmerized by the glint in his eyes as he recounted his adventures. He had taught me about the stars, about navigation, about the importance of courage and perseverance. He had instilled in me a sense of wonder and a thirst for knowledge. He had also warned me about the dangers of war, the brutal realities of conflict, the devastating toll it takes on the human spirit. He had seen things that no one should ever have to see, and he had carried those scars with him for the rest of his life. He never explicitly told me not to enlist, but I always sensed a deep sadness in his eyes whenever I spoke of joining the military. He understood the allure of service, the desire to protect one's country, but he also knew the price that was often paid. He wanted me to find a different path, a path that led to peace and fulfillment, not to destruction and despair. But I had been young and headstrong, eager to prove myself, convinced that I could make a difference. Now, as the Black Hawk lurched through the air, as the ground below was scarred and bleeding, I wondered if I had made the right choice. I wondered if I had listened closely enough to his warnings. I wondered if I would ever see him again. The compass in my pocket felt heavy, a weight of responsibility, a reminder of the promise I had made to myself, to my family, to return home safe. It was more than just a navigational tool. It was a symbol of hope, a connection to the past, a guide to the future. It was a promise that I intended to keep. The RPG slammed into the tail rotor with a sickening thud, the world tilting violently. Alarms blared, a cacophony of electronic screams that mirrored the terror clawing at my throat. I wrestled with the controls, adrenaline flooding my system, trying to compensate for the sudden, brutal loss of stability. The Black Hawk bucked like a wild horse, threatening to throw us all into the unforgiving Afghan landscape below. Johnson, his face pale but resolute, barked commands, his voice barely audible above the din. "Mayday, mayday, mayday! This is Black Hawk 2-6, we've taken RPG fire, tail rotor compromised. Request immediate assistance." The ground rushed up to meet us with alarming speed. I fought to keep the aircraft level, every muscle screaming in protest. We were losing altitude rapidly, and the unforgiving terrain offered no easy landing spots. Jagged rocks and unforgiving scrubland blurred beneath us. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I shoved it down, focusing on the task at hand. I had a crew to protect, and I wouldn't let them down. I wouldn't let him down. Then, a moment of clarity. I saw a small, relatively flat patch of ground ahead, a sliver of hope in the swirling chaos. It was a long shot, but it was our only chance. I adjusted our trajectory, aiming for the small clearing, knowing that one wrong move could be catastrophic. The ground grew closer, the details becoming sharper, the realization of the imminent impact a crushing weight in my chest. I braced myself, yelling a warning to the crew, praying that we would make it through. The impact was jarring, violent. Metal screamed, glass shattered, and the world went black. I woke to a world of pain. My head throbbed, my body ached, and the acrid smell of burning fuel filled my nostrils. The cockpit was a mangled mess of twisted metal and shattered glass. I coughed, trying to clear the smoke from my lungs, and looked around, my heart pounding in my chest. Johnson was slumped over his controls, his face covered in blood. I reached out, shaking him gently. "Johnson! Johnson, can you hear me?" He groaned, his eyes fluttering open. What happened?" he mumbled, his voice weak. "We crashed," I replied, my voice hoarse. "We crashed, but we're alive." The relief was short-lived. I looked back at the cabin. The sight that greeted me would forever be etched into my memory. Ramirez was pinned beneath a section of the fuselage, his face contorted in agony. He was alive, but barely. I scrambled towards him, desperately trying to free him from the wreckage. "Hang on, Ramirez! I'm going to get you out of here!" I yelled, my voice cracking with emotion. But it was no use. The metal was too heavy, too twisted. I couldn't move it. Then I saw him. Vargas. He was slumped against the side of the helicopter, his eyes closed, his face pale. There was a large piece of shrapnel sticking out of his chest. I crawled towards him, my heart sinking with each inch. I reached out, touching his face, praying that he was still alive. But it was no use. His skin was cold, his eyes vacant. He was gone. My best friend. Gone. Just like that. The grief hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to rage against the unfairness of it all. But I couldn't. I had to stay strong. I had to get Johnson and Ramirez out of here. But the image of Vargas's lifeless eyes burned into my soul. Years have passed, but the smell of burning fuel still lingers in my dreams. The sound of the alarms, the screams of the wounded, the sight of Vargas's lifeless eyes, they are all there, vivid and raw, as if it happened yesterday. Sleep offers no escape, only a relentless replay of that fateful day. I wake up in a cold sweat, gasping for air, my heart pounding in my chest. Sometimes, I reach out in the darkness, searching for Vargas, only to find an empty space beside me. The world sees a hero. They see the medals, hear the stories of bravery, and offer their gratitude. But they don't see the nightmares, the flashbacks, the crippling guilt that gnaws at my insides. They don't see the hollow shell of a man that I have become. They don't see the ghost of Vargas that haunts my every waking moment. I try to live a normal life. I have a wife, a beautiful daughter. They are my anchor, the only things that keep me from drifting away completely. But even with them, there is a distance, a barrier that I can't seem to break down. I love them fiercely, but I can't fully let them in. The fear of losing them, of seeing them suffer the same fate as Vargas, is too overwhelming. Sometimes my daughter asks me about my time in the army. She asks me about the helicopters, the battles, the heroes. I try to tell her stories, to paint a picture of courage and adventure. But the words catch in my throat, and the images in my mind are too dark, too painful to share. I see the curiosity in her eyes, the innocent admiration, and I feel a pang of guilt. She deserves to know the truth, but I can't bring myself to tell her. The silence is my constant companion. It fills the spaces between words, the moments of quiet reflection, the long, sleepless nights. It is the silence of loss, the silence of regret, the silence of unspoken pain. It is a silence that I can never escape. I see a therapist. She tries to help me process my trauma, to find a way to cope with the memories that haunt me. But the wounds are too deep, the scars too raw. I can talk about it, analyze it, dissect it, but I can never truly heal. The Black Hawk, the RPG, Vargas, they are all a part of me now, woven into the fabric of my being. I carry them with me, always. It is the price I pay for survival. The fear above the battlefield never truly leaves you. It just finds a new battlefield, inside your own mind. The rotor wash, a physical manifestation of grief, hammered at the small clearing as they set down. Sergeant Miller, his face etched with a weariness that belied his age, helped Maya from the Black Hawk. The ground felt alien beneath her boots, the familiar scent of pine and damp earth now tainted with the metallic tang of blood and fear. She stumbled, and Miller's hand, calloused and strong, steadied her. He didn't speak, his silence a more profound comfort than any words. The village was a ghost of its former self. Huts, once vibrant with life, were now charred skeletons against the twilight sky. The air hung heavy with the acrid stench of destruction. She saw them then, gathered near the village center, the survivors. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes hollow, mirroring the emptiness within her own soul. A small boy, no older than 5, clutched a tattered doll, his gaze fixed on the ground, oblivious to the world around him. As Maya approached, an old woman, her face a road map of wrinkles and wisdom, stepped forward. She looked at Maya, not with accusation, but with a profound sadness that resonated deep within Maya's heart. The woman reached out, her hand trembling, and gently touched Maya's cheek. A single tear traced a path down the woman's weathered skin. "You came back," the woman whispered, her voice raspy with grief. "You kept your promise." The words, simple yet imbued with such weight, struck Maya like a physical blow. The promise. A promise made in the fleeting moments of connection, a promise to protect, a promise to remember. Had she truly kept it? The weight of her failure, the faces of the fallen, the screams that still echoed in her mind, all screamed in protest. She knelt before the woman, her own tears blurring her vision. "I tried," she choked out, the words inadequate, hollow. "I tried, but I couldn't save them all." The old woman shook her head slowly. "You saved who you could. That is all anyone can do." She then pulled from within the folds of her worn clothing a small, intricately carved wooden bird. It was the same bird Maya had seen the children playing with during her first visit. She pressed it into Maya's hand. "Keep it. Remember us. Remember them." The bird felt warm in her palm, a tangible link to the lives lost, to the innocence stolen. It was a symbol of hope, fragile yet resilient, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, life, in some form, would find a way. Standing, Maya looked around at the faces of the survivors, their eyes reflecting the flickering flames of the makeshift pyre where they were burning the dead. She saw not just grief, but also a quiet strength, a determination to rebuild, to heal, to carry on. And in that moment, she understood. The battle wasn't over. It had merely shifted. It was no longer a battle against an external enemy, but a battle against despair, against the darkness that threatened to consume them all. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and made a new promise, not just to the survivors, but to herself. She would honor the memory of those who had fallen by dedicating her life to helping those who remained. She would use her skills, her experience, her pain, to fight for a better world, a world where such tragedies would never happen again. When she opened her eyes, the fear was still there, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was a motivator, a reminder of what was at stake. She looked at Sergeant Miller, his face still grim, but his eyes holding a flicker of understanding. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her resolve. As the Black Hawk lifted off, carrying her away from the ashes of the village, Maya looked back. The flames danced against the night sky, casting long, flickering shadows. She clutched the wooden bird tightly in her hand, a symbol of hope, a symbol of resilience, a symbol of the enduring power of the human spirit. The fear remained, but now, it was fear tempered by purpose, fear transformed into a fierce determination to make a difference, to honor the fallen, and to fight for a future where the cries of the innocent would no longer echo across the battlefield. The cockpit dissolved into the night sky. The mission had changed. The war had just begun.